earthly and divine. Where there is hatred, let peace sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is fear, let me bring faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. May all find a sanctuary, their soul needs.
sanctuary from St. Catherine of Siena. It could be said that God's foot is so vast that this entire earth is but a field on God's toe. And all the forests in this world came from the same root of just a single hair of God. What then is not a sanctuary? Where can I not kneel and pray at a shrine made holy by holy presence?
Earth Mass. An Earth Mass is a celebration of the earth, and today it is a celebration of the earth as a sanctuary. It is a celebration and a challenge to make of this life on this earth a sanctuary. Do you find sanctuary here? You can say it aloud. Yes. Yes or no. Do you find sanctuary here? Yes. Do you find sanctuary among your sisters? Yes. Under the warm sun? Yes. Do you have a place that feels like home? Yes. Are you still looking for refuge? Yes. Is your spirit restless, unable to pause long enough to feel that you are at home? Yes. Yes. Our bookkeeper, Amelia, she told a story at our last staff meeting. Amelia is a woman that knows how to find sanctuary on the earth no matter the season. In the summer, her staff meeting check-ins are about the beach and the warm sun. In the winter, it's about the ski slopes and the cold breezes. And in the autumn, her stories are all about the turning leaves and the way the air feels in autumn. The morning after the turning of the equinox, Amelia came to the staff meeting and said her gratitude for the beautiful summer and her embrace of the autumn and winter to come. When Reverend Scott and I moved here from Virginia, he made a promise to himself. He would attempt to embrace the New Jersey winter. Reverend Scott was born in August in Florida. His thermostat was set high. I was born in Connecticut, and some of my first memories are of giant piles of snow and endless blizzards. I like a good winter challenge, as long as it doesn't last through April, which it did last year. And you all promised me that it would not happen again, and I am holding you to that promise. You brought us here to Jersey. We need April. The seasons affect us. This is proof. It's proof that we are part and parcel of the earth, that our life is connected to all life, that our bodies change with the weather and the sunrise and the sunset patterns. Our heartbeats and our biorhythms literally slow in winter. We sleep better, but it is more difficult to rise. Right? The loss of light strips us of serotonin and dopamine, the happy chemicals. We have to work harder for our joy. Amelia accepted my request to share this story, her story, with you. She even said, embellish it. But it is wonderful and disconcerting just as it is, so I'll share without additions. Amelia ventured with her nephews to their mountain home, the sanctuary where she and her husband go in the autumn for cool nights and warm afternoons, for turning leaves and tremendous peace. This is their sanctuary for all these gifts, but also for certain absences. Your phone, if you went there, would not show any bars. Was that a sigh of joy or utter fear? This place is their hallelujah place, their breathe deep and be filled with mountain air place. They kept their devices, these nephews, they kept their devices close at hand, and they kept reaching for them, praying for a miracle satellite feed. That was an embellishment. But this isn't. Later in the weekend, they hiked to a nearby mountain, and as Amelia and her husband took in the tremendous views, feeling the Spirit move through their beings, the nephews did not look up from their Facebook, their Instagram, and their Snapchat accounts. That was their anchor, but also their prison. It was perhaps even their sanctuary. But what kind of a sanctuary blinds us to the rest of the world? Sure, the internet is a window, but what do we see through that window other than ourselves reflected back to us in Technicolor? There's a chapel on the southern edge of Crete that looks out from a craggy coast onto the ocean beyond. You can hike there, though often you have to hike through blistering winds and swallowing drifts of sand. But when you arrive, you will be blessed by three things. You will be blessed first by a spare place, wholly touched by time, eroded and preserved. You will be blessed too by a windbreak, so that you are able to hear the waves breaking on a nearby shore. And three, you will be blessed by a window, simply a window looking out into the immensity of the sea. But what matters is where the window is placed. It is placed where you might find a cross in other chapels, or the ark that holds the Holy Scrolls in a synagogue, or the mihrab, the note that indicates the direction of Mecca in a mosque. This window is placed where we have this chalice here, the symbol of our covenanted community. This sanctuary on the southern coast of Crete has in the place where the holiest of holies would be, a window to the sea. Why? So loved ones enjoying the sanctuary of the chapel could watch as the raucous waves crash on the coast. They could watch and they could pray for sanctuary for others, perhaps strangers or perhaps their loved ones, trying to make their way home through terror, through struggle, or even back from war. The holiest of holies in this sanctuary was a window, pronouncing that the most profound thing the worshipers could do was pray for the safety, the security, and the sanctuary of others. Parker Palmer, the faith leader and theologian, offers this from his text, Seeking Sanctuary in Our Own Sacred Spaces. I believe only if we know when and where to seek sanctuary, only if we know how to reclaim our own souls, then we can engage the world in life-giving ways. When service emerges from a sanctuary that nurtures the root of one's own inner wisdom, it's much less likely to be distorted by the violence of activism and overwork. Once we understand that, we are moving towards the heart of nonviolence, the only way of being that has a chance to transcend and transform the violence of our culture. Did you catch that? Parker Palmer said the violence of activism. And did you hear anything after that line? I have a hard time hearing anything after that line. It's jarring for me. And he said the violence of activism activism is linked to the violence of our culture, violence that includes overwork. We'll get back to the activism piece. But first, the violence of culture. And holy cow, is it messed up out there. Do you hear me? We just had a hearing aired on national media where a testimony of a woman's experience of sexual abuse was met with abuse. The abuse of white power, the abuse of procedural power, which is a real thing, the abuse of partisan power. When anguish is refuted with a bulwark of dismissal and anger, we are living in a violent culture. But the hearings are not the only example. When children are stripped from their parents to make a point, we are being torn apart by a violent culture. When the proclamation that Black Lives Matter is met with the angry retort that no, blue lives matter, we are living in a culture that has replaced empathy with selfish reaction. We are living in a violent culture. When white supremacists rise and terrorize, and our president equivocates and his supporters are gratified, we are living in a violent, dehumanizing culture that prefers amorality to self-scrutiny. Amen. Amen. When our transgender military members have to stay closeted to serve our nation as they are called, when their inherent worth and dignity is denied by a ban on their service, we are living in a culture of violence, a violence that bullies and silences some to mollify the irrational fears of others. It is no surprise that we have seen the rise of school shootings so that they seem less like anomalies and more like culture. And it is no surprise that Me Too arose from the anguish of these days. Violence is everywhere. If we don't start calling it by its name and denying its claim on our bodies, our souls and our national soul will be subsumed by it. But now, here is the part that aches for me to admit. We are permeable beings with permeable souls. Our emotional experience is linked to the emotional tenor of our family, our neighborhood, our nation. We are affective beings, which means that when we see, hear, feel, or sense the emotions of others, we are affected emotionally ourselves. Just think of how hard it is to stay calm when you're in a room with someone angry. And when you say, stay calm, that never works. Just think of how easy it is to cry when you're in a room with mourners, even if you don't know the deceased. We are affective beings. You've felt this. I've seen you come in here wobbling on unsteady legs after listening to a full day of hearings. I have heard you call out, what can we do? Not only as a plea to be of service, but as a plea to save your soul. When Parker Palmer says the violence of activism, he is not equivocating. He is not saying what our president said in the wake of the Charlottesville riots, that the protesters on both sides of the street were equally suspect. What Parker Palmer and what I am saying is that we can do violence to ourselves and to others when we act without love, without self-love, and when we act without peace, that peace within that creates a sanctuary for ourselves and then others. What he's saying, what I'm saying, is that we do violence to ourselves when our action is thrashing, when it comes from pain still too acrid to be imbued with our love. And we cannot be a sanctuary for others without knowing how to carve sanctuary for ourselves. Think of that chapel on the seashore in Crete. The window to the dangers of the sea is viewed from that protected sanctuary. Or think of the poem, Our Modern Reading by Mahogany Brown, where the poet shared, the way a woman holds her sister is the way she holds herself. You know this. To give it, to create it, to manifest it, we need to feel it right here. Experiments have been done on aggression escalation. Two people play a game of slapping one another's hands. When a slap stings, the first reaction is to hit back harder. Then the next slap comes even harder, and escalation continues in this reactive paradigm, often to the point of serious injury. To choose to de-escalate takes consideration and pause. It is not natural. Not natural. It is response, not reaction, and there is a huge difference between the two. Our reptile brains, these oldest parts of our brains, rightly assume that de-escalation is dangerous. Rightly assume that de-escalation is dangerous. We fear that we will be the victims of greater and greater attacks until we can no longer defend ourselves. Our reptile brain says, react harder, and now do you feel me? Have you felt this? There are some days I feel like everything in me is slapping back. Take that. With my blood boiling. I am reactive, I am reacting, I am no longer myself, I have lost my sanctuary. Let me pause here, though, before I am misunderstood. Some of my close friends and colleagues have been posting these beautiful memes of themselves online. It's a picture of their face, angry, and it says, angry black woman underneath. They are standing up to the expectation, also a part of our culture, that they should sit down, be quiet, and be nice. What's key here, though, is that their anger is not a reaction. They are responding. It takes work when culture oppresses and silences to stand up, just like the courageous in the Me Too movement. When culture says, shh, speaking and shouting, demanding to be heard is a response. Because the reaction is to just be silent, because that's where safety is. When culture says be nice and play by the rules, making your own rules is not a reaction, it is necessary. Anger is not wrong. Protecting oneself is not wrong. And getting pulled into a reactive paradigm, the reactive paradigm of our violent culture, this will perpetuate escalation without end, desacralizing this, our one and only life to live. Is the violence of culture that says those who are different, those who are on the other side, they are to be feared and hated. Is that seeping in? Have you felt this? Is the violence of culture that says it is either us or them, this is war, This is a battle. Is that seeping in? Is the violence of culture that says run or be swallowed, hurry or be left behind, is that seeping in? This violence tells us every morning that the day is not an opportunity unfolding, but a to-do list, that the earth is not a home, but a racetrack, that the sun, moon, and stars, grass, and trees are not blessings of existence, but resources to be used for profit and gain. Is that seeping in? What are our defenses? How do we rebuild our sanctuary soul so that it might be there to hold us and others in need? How? Love, friendship, pause, prayer, meditation, silence, song, worship, huddling together, singing freedom songs, kneeling, touching, cradling, walking, dancing, playing, vulnerability, tears, letting go, putting down our devices, breathing, 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 blessing, sanctuary. You are a blessing and a sanctuary for yourselves and for others. Take care of those precious, those holy gifts. They are what the violence of culture would steal. They are what the violence of culture would turn to dust and ashes. They are what must be tenderly, carefully, gratefully kept whole. Amen. May it be so.